So, to introduce Healing Justice London, Healing Justice London is an organisation that is working at the intersection of health, healing and liberation, working to essentially create new infrastructure that can support people who've been targeted by state violence and under-resourced in the context of England. So Rehearsing Freedoms is really operating as a month-long space to practice what abolitionist scholar Ruth Wilson Gilmore speaks to, of kind of rehearsing the practices we need to get free, to move towards liberation. And so this is taking shape in various panels, arts and cultural interventions, and spaces to experience joy and consider what we can do to practice moving towards the futures that we will hopefully be able to inhabit in the years to come. This panel is really exciting to be a part of for me, and I'll speak to that a little bit more in a moment. But it's really focusing on sound system culture and the radical legacy of sound system culture, particularly in the context of Lewisham. But sound system culture is very much entangled with Black resistance in the UK context, and we see that kind of legacy in many parts of the diaspora and shifting and morphing in beautiful ways. I guess I didn't know until probably later than I should have known that the roots of Notting Hill Carnival were really set up in resistance to white supremacist violence that was happening in the 1950s in England. And so what many now consider as just a party or carnival actually really has deep legacies in creating a space for collective grief and rage and building capacity to actually change the conditions that are creating harm for Black communities. And it was set up by Claudia Jones, who was a Trinidadian Marxist who did a lot of brilliant things, including creating the first kind of commercial Black newspaper in England. And so this legacy of sound system culture really spreads globally and has shaped electronic music and club culture across the world. For me, as someone that has spent a few years living in Berlin and currently still runs an event series there, I've been orienting more and more to sound system culture and its legacy as a beacon for this time. I'm a DJ, I'm also a booker and the creator of a party called Emergent Bass, which is an event series that celebrates polyrhythmic bass music rooted in the African diaspora. We book predominantly Black DJs and also some other global majority DJs that honor the roots of the different forms of electronic music that have come from sound system culture. So everything from dancehall to jungle, drum and bass, garage, the list goes on. We also partnered with the Archive de Jungen Kultur, the Archive of Youth Cultures, to document how there are also Black roots and entanglements that led to house and techno coming into Berlin. But these histories are not very well known, and so we've done what we can to restory that and really connect that to resistance, but also the inequalities that show up in club culture in this context of Berlin, which can manifest in Black and Arab people often not being let into clubs, and various other forms of harassment that sometimes take place in these spaces, which are often sort of situated as utopian in some way. So I'm really excited to get to chair this panel today and listen to the wisdom and the knowledge and the histories that both Julian Henriquez and Tiny T embody. So I'm going to introduce them and then invite them to come up, and we can kind of get into the presentations. So Professor Julian Henriquez is a convener of the MA Cultural Studies program, principal investigator on the ERC Sonic Street Technologies Culture, Diaspora and Knowledge Project, director of the Topology Research Unit and a co-founder of the Sound System Outer National Practice Research Group in the Department of Media, Communications and Cultural Studies at Goldsmiths, University of London. His credits as a writer and director include the reggae musical feature film Baby Mother and the short We the Ragamuffin. Julian researches street cultures, music and technologies, and is interested in the uses of sound as a critical and creative tool. His sound sculptures include Knots and Donuts at Tate Modern, and his books include Changing the Subject, Sonic Bodies, and Sonic Media that's forthcoming. So yeah, hopefully we can welcome Julian with us when you're ready. And Tiny T. So in 2005, Tiny T founded the vintage Caribbean music collective Ska Lavin, bringing together vintage selectors to thrill audiences all over Europe. Tiny is a joint member of Vinyl Splashdown Promotions, which started in 2011. Vinyl Splashdown have put on many successful events and have worked with artists such as Sister Audrey and Roger Robin. Tiny T has toured in Japan, Mexico, and over 20 European cities. He's played at charity dances for Matu Barakas, helped Jamaican artists in need, and has supported artists such as Winston Francis, Dennis Al Capone, and Roy Panton. In 2012, Tiny T was crowned Kings of Kings Clash winner in Hamburg, and in 2019, he was victorious again, winning the Berlin Vintage Reggae Clash. Tiny T continues to fly the flag for Jamaican and Caribbean music of yesteryear around the globe. So maybe we can give a little round of applause to open up for our speakers today.
Thank you, Carmel.
That's great. Thank you very much, Cami.
Yeah, thanks for having us. So just as a little bit of a structure, both Julian and Tiny T are going to present for 10 minutes each, and then we're actually going to go straight to audience questions for 20 minutes so that you'll have some space to share whatever is coming up after what I can imagine will already be quite rich. Then we're going to have a break. Some music will be played you can enjoy, and we'll come back after that break and have some questions between us on the panel before closing out. Yeah, thank you. So I'll hand over to Julian.
Okay, thanks again, Cami. Well, look, just to say how happy I am to be here in Rehearsing Freedoms, and it's been an opportunity to, work with the whole crew here, but also with Fazano, a long-standing friend of mine, and to meet up again with Cami, but also for my friend and colleague here, Tiny T. Tennyson is his real name, right? But his full name is Tiny T, the Mighty Cloudburst. Now, if that's not a name to crash into every party, I don't know what is. So I'm just going to speak for 10 minutes, so is he, and then we're going to open up for questions, as Cami just said. Okay, so the future is a long-forgotten past. Right, now that's a Russian proverb, actually. And so what I want to talk about today is about sound and sound systems and how we can use them in an imaginative way, in a way of imagining our futures. And it's spaces like this, right, for this whole festival, and spaces like this room that we're in now that provide the safety and the security and the good vibes to be able to do some of this imagining. And my suggestion is that sound and the history of sound can help us do that. And so after me, Tiny is going to come on, he's going to tell you, because he's a local man in Lewisham, right? And he will tell you his story, but he's here for a very, very good reason, right? And Fazana said about wisdom keepers, right? He is a wisdom keeper, right? But this afternoon, we're going to be wisdom sharers, right? And so that's what we want to do to get the knowledge across. Okay, so I'm going to try and do a couple of things at once and put in this next thing. So here we are in a space created by Rehearsing Freedoms, which we very much appreciate. And this idea of the future, actually we're quite good at it, right? I'm talking about Afro-Black presence in the world, and Afrofuturism made popular by this, we've been doing it for ages, is really kind of an interesting way of thinking through technology into where and what and who we want to be. And that's Yeah, that's an image where if you like, the locks are also electrical wires and cables, right? And we have our very own, who's that?
Grace Jones.
Grace Jones, right? Who's embodying, if you like, Afrofuturism, but also I would say Rasta-futurism, right? And that's how good we are. And so my background is making films, right? This one called Re the Ragamuffin, shot in Peckham. It's showing in the next couple of weeks in a retro film festival. And that gentleman there, sorry to point across you, right, is what? Not my you recognize him? No.
This guy?
Yeah, this guy there. What's his name? No. Jerry Lyons. Jerry Lyons. Okay, he's a veteran Lewisham musician who I worked with all those years ago to make this film. And so the next film I made was Baby Mother, a reggae musical. And that's how I got into this whole sound system business, right? And being in the studios in Jamaica and finding out how music can be written to tell a story for a musical. Right, I'm going to press on here. But all my knowledge comes from people like Tiny T here and the engineers in Jamaica, right? And it's a serious, serious business. This guy's Horace McNeil. He died recently, and he was a great source of sound system knowledge. There he is, very proudly holding a picture of himself in my book, right? And so I'm going to talk about that. But the depth of this culture, the sound system culture, goes right back to, okay, so you're looking at Hedley Jones there. He arguably is the inventor of the sound system in 1946, right? And he also invented the electric guitar. So this culture that we've got is very, very valuable and it's the value of the culture that I want us to be talking about later on, right? Because if we're not careful, that value is not going to go on to the next generation. We're the custodians. We in this room are the custodians of that culture. And so in 2016, I got together with some of my students to form this organization called Sound System International. And we work with local sound systems, particularly Young Warrior, Jar Shaka's son, the late great Jar Shaka, and we work with Unit 137, which is another sound system, local. They have their base in Hither Green, just up the road. Okay, so it's not just us alone as university people, because what we're interested in are the knowledge of practitioners, people who are actually doing it, and giving respect to that knowledge and what it's achieved. And we also work with the young people through Alchemy. This is a group got together by Mikey Fitzgerald some years ago. They use university studios on Saturday morning for young people training. And our contribution to that is to make that training suitable, their musical skills for sound systems, right? And this was one thing, the Lewisham, there they are, Alchemy All-Stars, right? And they really are. They're all young people performing on a sound system trail earlier this year. And it's absolutely great to see how they come up and through a little tutoring get their performance on top of their musical skills and their producing skills. And the big event for them was Lewisham People's Day, where we had them on Unit 137 in the park there. And that was an experience for us and for all of them to perform in public. You were there, you say, yeah, right, great. And I'm not going to name, and then that's Hi Lou from Unit 137 on the left at the controls as usual. Okay, and that's Kenny, absolutely brilliant performer, all of 15 years old. Right? And so we support the young people in the area. This is Sound System International, and we have events where in the university. And what's nice about these events is very often, this is the first one we had in 2017, and people were coming from the street or coming from the community and saying, I've never been inside Goldsmiths before, right? And that's an absolute shame to the institution that they're sitting on Lewisham High Street and the surprise, oh, you mean you can study reggae music? You can study sound systems in a university? I said, yeah, I've got a PhD in that. I've written books about that. Right, but this is, for me, that's what the college should be doing as a resource for the community, and there's one of our events. And what's happened here? And another one. And we fill the place. Yeah, and we've also done events abroad. You wouldn't necessarily know, but in Italy and Naples, there's a huge, very strong sound system culture. And so we had an event there a few years back, right? And there it is, good crowd, bigger than here. And online events in the pandemic, of course, that was located in Brazil, online event in Brazil. But I want to say a little bit about what a sound system session is, or a dance. And these big speakers, you actually have to feel the sound because you're in the middle of it. And that's very different from a headphone listening. And that's really one of the qualities of sound system, which is so important and so much needs to be appreciated. And it's a proper thing. That's a five-way system, right? Okay, and it's literally the sound waves being inside the music. And if you haven't felt that, you will never, ever know it. And if there isn't, because one of the themes is the spaces to play, right? And if there aren't the spaces to play, Tiny's thinking of coming back here with his set, right? If there aren't the spaces to play, you're not going to get the experience. And the engineers have taught me so much about how that all works, and their knowledge is just quite incredible. And filtering out the sound, and the workshops, this is in Jamaica. This is serious stuff. That's serious stuff, an old tube. And these guys know what they're doing. They haven't read, well, they have read the textbooks, but they're not dependent on textbooks knowledge. And that really impresses me. So anything I know is only from their generosity to share. And there's the workshop, outdoors, everything, right? Okay, but the main thing is the movement is a feeling, right? That's Uptown Mondays in Kingston every Monday. And lots of other dances. They are street dances. It's taking over space with sound, right? And if we don't have the space, we can do it outside in the Caribbean, but we can't do it so much outside here. And the dance and the movement, because movement is music, and it's all vibrations. Isn't that nice? Wow. And it's multimedia with the video camera live projected in the event. Okay, so that was Sound System International, but from that I got the confidence and this thing, talking to practitioners and making practice as research, the whole sort of reason for being, to get some serious investment from the European Community Research Fund. And that's a 5-year project, which I'm right in the middle of. And so we have to display their logos whenever we go anywhere, right? But it's Sound System, it's Sonic Street Technologies is the website to look for. Okay, whoops, I want to go back there. Yeah, and we do research all over the world, but also in Lewisham. Lewisham is a mine of information. I've got some pamphlets here, if you hold that a second, thank you, Tiny, which you can pick up, right, which give a history of Lewisham sound, right? It really is quite incredible, the amount of talent, not just the mighty Cloudburst, right, but Saxon sound that I've worked with, right, is all from here. And if you want the details, I've got copies of this for everybody here. You can pick them up when I finished. And so that's important. We're doing research. We're getting serious government money for research, but we're also, and I've been given a time limit, right. And there's the same Jerry Lyons in our filming locally. And what we do and how I met Tiny here was for this event, which was what we call a reasoning session, which is a sort of a conference, right, which we filmed and then showed as a film to the participants. And that was all done in Goldsmiths. So this is just to say how seriously we're taking sound system culture, right? And it needs to be taken seriously, and that's the website. You can look at our YouTube channel and see that film anytime you like. Right, the film of discussion. It was called Generation to Generation, right? And there we are. And basically, the thing is to open up the college to the community and to people that are interested, and that's what we're doing here. And particularly, we were asked when sadly Jar Shaka passed, the family asked to hold his 9 nights at Goldsmiths. And for me, that I've tried to say, well, look, use the Moonshot, use the Albany, but they said they wanted the status of the place. That's what they told me afterwards. And so we're very happy to do that. And that worked out very well. We had more people in Goldsmiths on that night, on that afternoon than ever before. Nearly 4,000 people came through the doors. We had to close the doors, in fact. There it is. Yeah? And that's how a college should be used, right? And that's what it looked like. Okay, I nearly finished now. And we've also done similar reasoning sessions in Jamaica. There we are with that. And what we're doing, just to say that sound systems are important here, they're important all over the world. You wouldn't believe there's sound systems in India, right? In Australia, in America, in Canada. And so basically, you know, but the UK has a key position in forwarding the culture, right? And that's really important. I'm nearly on my last slide. And so we put out this postcard getting the sound systems around the world to sign up and get themselves on a map. On our website, we have the sonic map to appreciate our global strength, right? And there it is again. And so these are just 3 slides from different sound systems. This is a Brazilian sound system. Quite impressive, eh? Okay, that's another Brazilian one called Crocodilo. They call it aparelhum. That's a Brazilian word for apparatus. And you can see, well, I mean, that is a whole monster sound system. And so basically sound system culture, we know it as reggae sound systems, happens with different musics in all different parts of the world, right? And there it is. And that's from Colombia, right? And that's our next event. We're having a film festival in Jamaica in February from the films that we've commissioned from sound systems around the world. Okay, so we ourselves in the research community, and that's my last image, which I think you might recognize as Sankofa bird. And it's about, basically, the bird flies forward while looking backwards. And that is one of the perfect images of what we need to do, right? Because unless we know what our future or what our past has been, we're not going to get to know our future, or rather to make the future. Because sound system culture, and this is what Tiny's going to tell you about, is something that's made, if you like, bottom up from the street, right? And basically, that is something that we have created, and unless we continue to create it, it's going to disappear, or rather be passed on to other hands, not those that made it, and not those that should be benefiting from it. Okay, so those were a few thoughts. We've got something very precious here, and we've got some precious wisdom here, and so I'll hand over to Tiny T. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Julian.
Thank you, Julian. Thank you, Carmel. First and foremost, I'd like to just welcome everyone for participating and being part of this session. Carmel, excellent, and all your crew, camera crew, and all the rest of it, thank you for making this possible. I'd like to start off by saying, by introducing myself. My name's Tennyson, real name, got a DJ name of Tiny T. My father was a sound man, born in Jamaica, and came to England 1955. He had a little sound system in Jamaica. He brought it here, and he was a very quite popular DJ in England during the 50s and 60s in England. I was born in the 60s, and so growing up, we was in a house where we had speaker boxes and loads of records. Let's just go fast forward 10, 20 years, and from leaving school, most of my friends knew that my dad was a DJ. He used to DJ in a club right next door to my school. So I got thrusted into this position. At Christmas parties, they all know that I had the popular charted tunes, so I would be asked to bring them to school and play them. And this is how I ended up becoming a DJ and really wanting to follow in the footsteps of my dad. So along the way, you learn a lot, and you realise that music, going on another 10 years later, music is a strong medium. It's got this way of projecting messages and spreading messages, etc. So, having wanted to follow my father's footsteps, my father immigrated to America. He left the sound system and a bundle of records. And slowly but surely, I got interested and wanting to follow in my father's footsteps. My father was a pioneer of a sound man called Shaka, rest in peace, who passed away recently. And Shaka was very successful, more successful than my father. And this sort of taught me that, you know, the legacies that people start should always be continued. And that's what got me more focused on the sound system culture and looking at it more closely. And over the years, you realise that it's a good tool. It's a good tool of, there was a lot of segregation. I grew up around this area, and throughout the 70s and 80s, there was a lot of segregation, a lot of covert racism. So the music sort of takes you down a path where you want to sort of spread the message that, you know, unity is strength, away with racism and all sorts of messages. We used to use the music to sort of spread a message. So that's how I've sort of really capitalized on the sound system culture. We've dominantly used it as a message. Whatever message that may be at the actual time, depending on what's going on, we use it as a message. Carmel mentioned the times we're living in with the Israelites and the Arabs fighting. This has been going on since I was born. I remember when I was young, every news you watched, it was the Arabs and the Israelites fighting. And to find out that 60, 50 years later, it's still happening, it's a sad, sad situation. So once again, you know, and even now, I find myself digging in my collection, finding music which portrays the times. And just yesterday, I found a tune called No Peace. And this is how we use the music. Whatever's going on in our life, we tend to find records that people's made that fits that situation. So that's basically me. I was fortunate enough to travel the world and see a load of other countries capitalizing on sound system culture. And then you sort of start putting the dots together and realizing that it's a wider thing than what you realize in your local community. And you realize that other countries and other people are grasping it, getting into this science system culture and using it in the same fashion and the same forms of spreading messages. So it was quite enlightening after sort of spending most of my years in England to be able to travel and see this picture being painted all over the world, Italy, and very often more advanced than England, to be honest, in some cases. So that is basically me on the sound system culture. And I'm very honoured to be part of this session, as Julian's reasoning sessions previously, because what I've decided to do is to try to even expand it further, looking for safe places, as Carmel's provided, and looking to enhance and integrate our culture. It is a cultural thing. It started off as a cultural thing, sound systems, and to improve it and spread it wide and afar and integrate it. Most of my integration with other races, religions, or whatever the case may be, has been through music. My events, other events, it's a safe space where you meet other communities, other races, and it's a common denominator. And this is where I've experienced success and what's the appropriate word? Satisfaction in the sound system culture what it does bring to a community and what it does bring to people's lives. So that's me in a nutshell. And yeah, generally I'll encourage everyone to get involved in sound system culture, listen to the lyrics, listen to the music, and just to go another step level that Julian mentioned earlier, you know, sound, I'm just learning this, to be honest. Sound is a frequency, is a sound frequencies. And there's a lot of things in our life that responds to frequencies, certain sounds. And even though my father's sound wasn't a big sound, in going to other sound systems, I realised that they've got bigger and bigger and bigger. And going to a lot of sound system sessions, I noticed that a lot of people standing up in front of the speaker boxes. And I thought, this is not right. You should allow space for the sound to travel. But I noticed that a lot of people were standing up immediately in front of the speaker boxes. I couldn't understand why. And then I decided to try it myself. When I tried it myself, there's the vibrations and the frequencies, it hits a spot. Then I start to research, and sure enough, the human body responds to frequencies. And I don't want to go too deep, I don't know enough, but this is a course that's something that I'm trying to research and educate myself about sound frequencies. So it's a continuous journey, learning about it, etc., etc. So that's where I'm at now. So that's me. Sound system culture is integrated into my life completely, and there's so much for me still to learn. There's so much for us all to learn about sound systems and its heritage and its usage.
Thank you. Okay, so we are going to have some time to go straight to audience questions, which, yeah, you don't have to wait till the whole thing. You can kind of get into, yeah, any themes that are already arising for you that you might want to ask either Tennyson, Tiny T, or Julian.
Any questions?
Yeah, and do you want to come? Let's think about the best way we can do this with a microphone, maybe. I think it's just about the live stream, maybe. I'm just going to check.
I just wanted to ask, thank you so much for a really incredible presentation. I just wanted to ask about, that was the scene in Lewisham. Was there like inter-different boroughs, kind of DJs coming from one place to another, any form of exchange on the sound system front? And how would that be like and look like? Thank you.
I'm just going to repeat this for those on the live stream. So if there was interconnection between different boroughs, so outside of just the culture in Lewisham, what that looked like with sound systems.
Most definitely. There's always competition. And it was quite exciting because we had the sound systems over North London, East, West, North, South. And yes, it was a very competitious game. And yes, it was very exciting. And the other sound systems, obviously, just like most sports, just like a sports, it became very competitious. And there was very competitions for gold, for cups, etc. So yes, just like a sport, we had other teams and big competitions every year. One competition that sprung to mind is Brixton Town Hall. I was not there, but my father told me about it, where one sound system used one record 3 years straight to win the cup. No one couldn't find this record, and he used it 3 times to win the competition. So yes, it was a competitious time.
And also, what was the record? I don't know.
I've asked my dad the same question. If he used it 3 times, all he said it was a boogie woogie tune, it was American tune, and he said every time he put it on, the crowd would just go mad. Suckle, the sound was Count Suckle, yeah, Brixton Town Hall.
But also there's this kind of, well, not say competition, but there's influence to and from Jamaica itself, right? Which is interesting. When the, even Saxon sound with some Daddy Colonel and many other DJs actually with the fast chat, smiley culture, right? Actually influenced the Jamaican scene, and that is quite interesting. It's not just a one-way thing, and also in the technology, right? Some of the preamps which are built in this country are the most highly prized ones in Jamaica. So it's kind of interesting the flows. I mean, globally as well as across the country.
Thank you. Yeah, any other questions? Yeah.
Hi, you spoke a little bit about studying sound systems in other places, and you mentioned Italy specifically. And I was just wondering how scenes in European cities sort of, I suppose, honor the Jamaican origins, and also how those scenes differ from the Jamaican scene. So what are the iterations of?
Yeah, no, that's nice. So yeah, so right across France is very, very active on the sound system scene at the moment, right? And Italy. And so, I mean, this is fine to one extent. I mean, lots of other countries in Belgium, Spain, in Europe, and then outside as well. In certain parts of Brazil, reggae sound systems are very big, so that's interesting. Well, what's interesting is that there was a kind of a moment, the classic moment of sound system technology and music in the early 80s, right? And that's when, late 70s, early 80s, that's when Jar Shaka came, basically, Jar Shaka continued that moment to this day, till his passing, right? Of the dub music, the specials, and that's what we all love so much. And interestingly, the whole of Europe has taken off from that specific spot. That Jar Shaka is the biggest influence on European sounds than all the Jamaican sounds that have come since, and the music that's come since, right? Which is dancehall since the middle of the beginning of the 80s. And so, the branches of reggae are very many, and they sort of, or the roots of reggae land in different places, right? And that's great, but what, and where, as Tiny will say, we welcome enthusiasm for our music from anybody and everybody, right? For the connections, right? But it's and why they like it is a kind of protest music. And you can map around the world where Bob Marley landed and gave his concerts. He's literally seeded a sound system culture in Australia, in New Zealand, through his visits, which is very interesting, right? But what I'm saying is it's great that it's taken up like that, but the benefits of the culture don't go back to the creators of the culture. And that's what we're talking about, the intergenerational thing, right? Unless we, as a broader culture, keep it and cherish it, right? Then it's going to, it's not disappear, but it will go into different hands, which is fine to some extent, but it's not the same as having ownership of basically our cultural heritage. And that issue of, what we're here about, the transmission, the gift between one generation and another generation is not just a problem in the UK, it's also a problem in Jamaica. That the young people in Jamaica, because we had a reasoning session in Jamaica, and this is what the professionals were telling us, right? The young people they don't want to be lifting heavy boxes. They don't, if you can do it on a laptop, you can do it with some powered speakers, well, that's easy, isn't it? Right? But some of the young ones are into it, so it's not all lost.
Thank you. Yeah, I think there are lots of parallels, even just in, the club culture context when we think about house and techno as well, which, started in black communities and are now incredibly successful with huge amounts of money behind predominantly white artists, to the point that many people, including in Berlin, one of the techno capitals of the world, aren't even aware that it was created by black people. And even the originators of the music, many of whom are still alive, are not being booked for festivals or, big nights. And so I think there is still this dynamic at play, which we know comes from structural racism and inequality, just one of the manifestations in the music industry. And I guess something people are consistently trying to attend to. Any other questions?
I'm quite interested in. Hi. I am quite interested in this idea that sound enables us to sort of imagine the future, and I was wondering if you guys could speak a little bit more to the ways in which that sort of transpires, or how the effects sort of relate to that. I think I wondered if Camila had said earlier, this idea of building capacity and about sound being movement, so this idea of taking over space and creating capacity for feeling is probably one of the main ways that transpires, but really keen to hear a little bit more about your thinking through that.
Right, so sound, as I said previously, listening to sound systems all my life, and the culture, the frequencies, I mentioned earlier on that some people resonate to a certain frequency. Me personally, I've used sound system cultures in so much different ways. I've used it for my integration with cultures. Sorry, rephrase your question one last time. There was one last bit.
About creating futures. Yeah.
Right, so the sound system, I'm a great believer of the laws of attraction. And, when it comes to, well, as I said, my father was a DJ, and I wanted to continue in his footsteps. So I just literally sat down on the internet and redesigned myself, gave myself a name, a DJ name, and just literally invented myself. I was a bit disheartened that most of the sound system people that I grew up with wasn't getting any recognition and wasn't doing much in their lives regarding the music. But yeah, I was on the internet seeing all these other countries flourishing. And while the development of sound system culture you cannot stop, and I did view it as development, felt a little bit hard done by that, So I invented myself as a DJ, and I wanted to go and show the world that the original guys are still here, and we do still play music, and I wanted a little slice of this cake. So once again, you can use music. It's a very imaginative thing, and there's so much love songs that we all relate to that fits into our lives, and it's the same thing with any other music. You can integrate it into your life and manifest off of it, get creative ideas, and then put it into practice. And I've done this. I've just imagined that I wanted to be this DJ, and I wanted to travel the world, and it manifested itself. And this is through music, just sitting there, thinking about it, listening to it, and then going out and acting on it. I've listened to songs in my life, and there's been sentences in songs that relate to me, resonate to me, and I've been able to listen to a song and go out and implement that in my life. So ideas, creativity is music, and yes, you can continue it and use it to your advantage in your life. That's my take on it.
And just very quickly to complement that, to answer your question, I mean, music and sound create space, right? We have control over sound in the way that we don't have control over other things. So we can use, like at carnival or in a dance or in a session, we can use this, literally the sounding from the speakers to make a space that we can inhabit, right? And basically inhabit with other people and feeling, feeling good, feeling safe, and feeling together with other people. And for me, if we're going to imagine a future, we have to do that with each other. That we cannot do that alone. It has to be a shared project. It's something that we make together, right? And that's very different from the futures that we're offered, right? That people are making futures, the corporations are making futures for us all the time. They're giving us choice between one gadget and the next gadget. They're giving us choice on the menu between what this gadget can do. But that's not our future. We have no ownership in it. We have no stake in it. And that's not the kind of future I want. And therefore, the actual session itself of people coming together, I mean, the Jar Shaka Memorial where we met up again last Sunday was an example of that. This space that we've got here, the vibe here, that Rehearsing Freedoms has created is an example of that. And that's what sound does. It brings us together and also allows us to project forward. And traditionally, just one last thing, you go to, basically, the dance was where you went to meet, if you're a boy, to meet the girl. The dance is where you went, if you're a girl, to meet the boy, right? Basically, a good tune makes babies, right? So if that's not making a future, then nothing is.
I think on this point of taking up space as well, I just want to use this opportunity to uplift someone who, is bringing a lot of attention to the ongoing apartheid situation for Palestinians. Sama Abdul Hadi is Palestine's first electronic music producer and DJ. She's done a lot of incredible work through her practice as a DJ, bringing attention to the ongoing occupation and and all of the kind of things that come with, the conditions of leisure or luxury that we often associate with club space and club culture, but also as trying to bring political resistance and information through the music, kind of as an ongoing reference to what you were both speaking to about using the container and the music and the platform to also educate and to spread awareness about what is taking place. So I just wanted to, name her and the work that she is doing as well. I know we are approaching our break, so maybe we take one more question from the audience and then we will have a 10-minute break. Maybe I'll ask a question then. Is that cheeky? I mean, if someone really wants to ask one, then I can wait because I'm going to ask some afterwards. Okay. I'm curious because you've both referenced a bit these kind of connections and how sound system culture spreads spreads through the diaspora. I'm interested if you can speak to the connections between African musical traditions and sound system in terms of polyrhythms and bass frequencies and how that might connect to the continent. As a small anecdote, a dance teacher of mine, Thomas Presto, who's a sort of dance hall master, but Trinidadian origin, taught me that dance hall beat actually started because of the banning of the drum under enslavement and colonization. And so to keep the rhythm and that communication technology, people would take sticks to make the gung, 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 gung. And so there's already this legacy in the music, and I'm curious if you could speak to, this kind of cross-pollination of how sort of African rhythms moved across in the transatlantic slave trade, but now maybe how it's cross-pollinating to places like Uganda, where there's a really interesting electronic music scene, and I'm just wondering if you could speak to that a bit.
Not in great depth. I think you probably know more about it than I do. But the one of the interesting kind of the big transition in Jamaican music was between reggae and dancehall, right? And it's interesting that the reggae is probably well known, is based on a Nyabingi rhythms, right? And that is from one part of Africa. And the dancehall rhythms, which are quite different in many ways, right, were based on Kumina rhythms, right? And so you've got, just in the changes of Jamaican music, changes of, if you like, African influence to different parts, which I find kind of interesting. And I went to a talk last night, a sculptor called Sakari Douglas Camp, and she was talking about her home culture in the Niger in Delta, the oil area, and she was telling me about this her sculpture. She's a metallurgist. She works in sheet steel, right? She's a strong woman, and she showed these steel renderings of fabric with lots of holes in, right? And she explained that there's a tradition called pulled thread, right, in that part of Africa, right? In that particular region, the actual material comes from India, interestingly, right? But they pull out the threads to make a fabric with lots of holes in it, right? I found that fascinating, and I was just sort of thinking about that, and I thought, that's what I've described dub music as a subtractive aesthetic. You're taking stuff out, right, to make the space for us to inhabit as listeners, right? And she's a friend of mine, I'm going to talk to her about that, whether she makes a connection between pulling the fabric to make the space to enter, and the dub music taking out the vocals and the other musical elements. And that could be, not a kind of rhythmic, but across media, from visual fabric to sound, which has, if not an influence, a huge parallel in this particular West African culture. So, there you go.
The only thing I could add is that, we all know that the drum was the first means of communication. And, even our reggae music has got predominantly drum and bass beat. And it's been said that this drum beat resonates with your heartbeat. So I think there could be a connection there. But music in general is such a creative thing, and Jamaican people, not probably only Jamaican people, but when I was growing up, every other record that came out had a dance to it. They created their own dance to whatever music was coming out. And it's quite amazing. Back in the 60s and 70s, you had a dance called the Penguin, the Funky Chicken, the Rocksteady, and every other music that came out, they developed a new dance. I found that was quite creative. So I think there's definitely a tight relationship regarding dance and music. And as Julian said, one of the main concepts of going to a session, which was a party, was to either dance with a woman, and generally enjoy yourself. So I think there's a big correlation going on regarding dance and music.
Thank you. Okay, maybe we can just give a round of applause and we'll go to a break. Okay, welcome back everyone. We're gonna get into the second part of our session. And I've got some questions for you both. some of which I think you've already started to touch on, but maybe we can go a bit deeper into certain themes. So the first question is, how has sound system culture impacted social change in the UK? And could you maybe expand on some of the things you might have said around that?
Sound system culture, how it impacted on the UK. For me, it done a lot. As I said previously, most of my integration with other races was through the sound system culture. It also taught me my roots. A load of Jamaican music tells a story about our journey from Africa and repatriation, etc. So the music has had a great impact on me culturally. My parents come from Jamaica. I didn't go there till I was about 25. But in just listening to the music, it taught me a lot about my own culture and other things. So that's my experience regarding music and culture.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm going to give two answers to this. Sort of the up answer is basically British culture would not be what it is today without black music, right? I mean, basically, before we arrived, there was no bass line, right? Yeah. You know, and I mean, that is a matter of fact. And my friend and colleague, Michael Riley at Westminster, he has this whole project, Bass Culture, which is precisely about that. He's got an excellent film about the influences of sound system culture on the music culture of this country. And this music culture, literally, as you've been saying, Cami, you know, forgets its roots so often, right? And so basically, we can't imagine who we are today without basically acknowledging the affects and effects of not just reggae music, but black music, and all the ways that in fact sound system and reggae music has influenced virtually every other popular music form. So that's kind of exciting. But and so that's a great big push forward into the future that the Tiny's parents' generation gave to this country. But you have to turn it around and say, okay, our influence on the society as a whole, but look, we have to look the other way around as well. The society's influence on us, right? And the culture that every street in Lewisham, back in the day, had its little set of boxes, its little owner. It wasn't a big deal to have a sound system. It's just what you did. And the reason for that wasn't like, oh yeah, we just want to keep by ourselves, was basically pushed back from literally a hostile environment, right? And so the hostility of the environment forced the previous generations into back rooms, into the shebeens, into the blues, into the basements, moving out all the furniture, you know, crushing in there, and basically making a space for ourselves, right? And so the culture has had a terrific, the country has had a terrific influence on the culture, but it's kind of like a pressure cooker influence, right? A pressure, right? To be inventive and to make our own spaces because we weren't allowed into the spaces that the rest of society could get into. Just lastly, and there's one person here who's studying this, is the actual changes and the commercialization and the gentrification of so much of the country, of the cities, right, is putting huge, huge pressure on spaces to play at the moment. And we've got to strengthen the culture through finding the spaces in order to resist that and to basically have, well, basically this productive energy that we get when we're together and we're making our own space. Right, and so there's pushes in both directions, from the big society to us and from us to the big society.
Thank you for that. I'm going to go deeper into this question of space because I think it's really important. But I also wanted to talk a bit about hearing that, you know, before black people were really represented in the media in this country, or before black music was played on radio, I guess part of that protest lineage in terms of lyrics was also sharing the news, right, of like what was happening to people in communities, what was happening with police. And so at that time, because there wasn't a kind of representation in dominant society, the music was being utilized to almost as an alternative media source. And I think that is an interesting thing to consider in these times when, you know, a lot of the stories and narratives and experiences we have, as we're seeing in this moment, are not being represented by the dominant news. And I'm curious for myself what artistic interventions could look like to actually sharing knowledge with each other and public education, because it seems like that was so beautifully done with music at that time of the sound system culture.
Can I just come in on on a thing on that? Yeah, but that's not just the case in this country of the media not giving a true picture, right? And it's also on a not on a race basis or racialized basis, but on a class basis in Jamaica, right? And the sound systems, right, were as you say, they were media, right? Because the music was not being played on the radio, right? It was in dancehall music. It's called dancehall music because the only place you could hear it was the dance hall, not more generally. And if you take the first sound systems, the names of it, Prince Buster's sound system, right, was called The Voice of the People, right? And Prince Buster got the first #1, I think, with the Israelites in the 60s.
Desmond Dekker.
What?
That was Desmond Dekker.
Desmond Dekker,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Desmond, oh yeah, of course it was. Desmond Dekker. Anyway, so this, how would we expect otherwise than the ruling class to maintain its power through its media? Who owns the media, right? And again, that goes back to having our own culture and having our own technology and having our own spaces where we can communicate in a way that is going forward rather than reinforcing the inequalities that we have at the moment.
Thank you. So yeah, on this point of space, like I know you've mentioned it already, but access to space is really necessary to experience the sound system, but have gatherings in general. And given the context of austerity in the UK, which includes housing insecurity for a lot of people, the closure of community centres and many clubs, what do you think the younger generation can try out in order to try and preserve sound system culture and just, you know, creatively engage in having gatherings when there seems to be less and less space available for us to do that?
Well, you know, as you've mentioned, space seems to be the main issue. Finding that safe space, finding a space where you could be yourself, basically. And, you know, from a DJ perspective, we always look for venues to play out at. And I can only say that when I found a venue where I've got people that appreciate the music and want to do it, we've achieved more. So the safe spaces are paramount. Finding the safe people that want to go on your journey is paramount. Once you get those conditions, we could be very creative. We could create such a lot once the conditions are right. So just to reiterate, safe spaces, it's all about finding those safe spaces. I can only cast my mind back on my own experiences, but most of the promotions I've done that have been successful, that has lasted me like 5 years, 10 years at a time, unfortunately, they've been amongst my own people that recognize my culture, appreciate the music, etc. And then we've been able to produce. Just during the break, I was speaking to someone I just met in here, and he's from Peru, this gentleman, and he's got a sound system. And we was talking about the fusions of music to cater for whoever you want to. So it's back to the media. In Chile, he says they listen to Afro jazz, two sets of music fused together to cater for those people. And over England's been very dynamic at it. We've created like lovers rock, predominantly English sound of music, jungle music, predominantly a fusion of reggae, dancehall, soul, R&B, fused together to form a music for the people. And back to what Julian said, voice of the people, it is all for the people. So that's how we can use the sound system culture. The youngsters coming up, if they want to integrate, if they want to be creative, this is what must be done. There is so much different music around the world, depending on what part of the world you're in, and it all can be fused. Most music that I come across is a fusion of two different nationalities or two different countries, music fused together to form a music. That's something that's very creative as well, and it brings people together, and it's very developing as well.
Thank you. What do you think about this issue of space, Julian?
I'm going to answer it in a minute, but you had a chat with it. I'd like to hear about this sound system in Peru, just a little bit.
Chile. Basically, I was in the border, Chile and Peru, and Bolivia as well. Very multicultural area. Andes, Afro descendant in Peru, Chilean culture as well, and in combination with the rest of the world, you know. I started to play music middle of the 90s, but basic with soul and funk in the radios, 80s, you know. And yes, the sound system in this case is bass. We like bass, you know. And it's really important. I used to carry a heavy sub bass, and we speak about technology that now, with the technology you can produce a good sound with the less of size of the equipment. And I would like to ask you, what do you think about the technology we can use for a good purposes, and at the same time, people can use unconsciously for a bad purpose? Probably I'm going to put a very discussion topic about, for example, the reggaeton. They use probably the African root with a no good lyrics and with a really bad sound at the same time.
Do we have any reggaeton fans in the audience? I mean, yeah.
Probably a musician can do a very nice reggaeton with very organic instrument, with very good lyrics, but no happens, I think.
I'm not going to criticize.
I don't know the group reggaeton, but it's a bad fusion, whoever they are. So, as you said, fusing the music is always a good thing, but get your fusion right. End of.
Going back to your question about the spaces, it's interesting to think exploring other spaces, right? And in the gallery space has been you know, moving, if you like, up market has been one. Boss Space Obsidian sound system has been quite successful at that in terms of getting a Turner nomination and so on. So it just shows the pressure at a sort of at an ordinary level to find the venues is forcing people, if you like, to go into completely different kind of spaces of the gallery. Well, it's, again, there's nothing wrong with that, but it shouldn't be the only way that we can go, because most people don't have access to art galleries to do to do their music. You know? And you know, you get the tape late. So just the other night they had a music set there, which is good. But I mean, again, that's not our space. We're there as guests. We haven't got ownership, and it's about owning the culture, owning the space.
And being able to feel free, right? Like, and being able to feel free, because I know that I don't always feel. I mean, there's a lot of times I don't feel comfortable in art gallery spaces, and I know that, in a sense, I've been to university and I have a degree and a certain amount of privilege from that, and yet if I'm uncomfortable, I know a lot of other people are also going to feel even more uncomfortable in how those spaces operate. But some interesting things I'm seeing with my peers. So Sarah Wild, who runs a party called O141 in Glasgow, they've started renting football stadiums, like football clubs, spaces in football clubs, where they can, they have to bring their decor in, they have to bring their own sound system in, but it means they have the container to design it totally as they want, and they're not reliant on an alcohol bar. Because I think that's one of the big things at the moment is like, if you want to access space, maybe you can, but then you have to, spend a huge amount on the bar or put down a huge deposit. And so I think it can be quite limiting, because before you could rent a community center or a church, but there's less and less of these spaces. There's also a party in LA called Hood Rave, and they actually started out in a barbershop. They just rented a barbershop, took it over, and again made their own kind of container that worked for them. So they're kind of two situations that feel inspirational. And also hearing of friends in Berlin just starting to make free parties again, actually, just going and making raves, in green spaces.
So yeah, just to reiterate on that, you're spot on there. Be creative. My friend there mentioned earlier on about the new technologies. How can we incorporate new technologies to move our thing forward? One of the main problems has been the loud music, that reggae music that's been associated with reggae music. And one way forward is to, my dad, when they was back in their day, as Julian mentioned, his sound system wasn't a big sound system. It was just 2 boxes. Everyone had a sound system. And they used to go around looking for the smaller sound system, but with the best sound. So bigger is not always better. And directional sound can enhance this problem, whereas we always want to have our music loud. But if you use directional speakers, which is pointing towards your ears, then you don't need to have it as loud as necessary. So that is a way moving forward regarding finding safe spaces. And as what you said, Carmel, I've got the same problem at the moment, finding a safe space. And what I've decided to do is to take it from a different angle. Find a safe space in the middle of a park, and then if they haven't got a set, put a set in there. If they haven't got a bar, go back to what you were saying, soft drinks, allowing people to bring in, if they want to drink alcohol, allowing them to bring it in. With the state of the economy now, no one's got no money with the cost of living, so we have to start thinking outside the box. What is not normal needs to sort of be employed. So that's my way forward regarding finding safe spaces and moving our thing forward, really. This is a beautiful building. I must tell you that.
It's vibey.
It's in the middle of nowhere, and I love the people, so.
Did you want to say something,
No, I
Julian?
was just going to say about your vinyl splashdown and running your...
Oh, yes. So I run a promotion called Vinyl Splashdown, which is a platform to allow anyone who wants to be a DJ, who considers themselves as a DJ or a professional DJ, to come and splash down with their vinyl. And we haven't done it for a couple of years because of the same reason, safe space. And I just don't want to go into one of these bars and then 6 months later it's too loud, it's too noisy. I've done this about 6 times in my life. So, don't want to keep going around in circles. They say if you keep doing the same thing and expecting different results, you're mad. So, that's my situation now. So, Final Splashdown is a promotion I do, which was for the community. Anyone who fancies themselves as a DJ could come. We used to video it. We used to give them a video the next week. Here you are on the turntables, DJ. We used to present them with a shield, a little trophy for just participating. And it was a nice community thing, and we searched for a safe space, to be honest.
Yeah, thank you for that. That sounds like a great space to be part of. And there's a couple of things I wanted to share based on what you both were saying. I know for us at Emergent Bass, partially as an accessibility measure, but also because of noise, we did a lot of daytime parties, outdoor daytime parties, and that kind of also allowed us, I think, to get around noise restrictions, but also make it more accessible for immunocompromised people, given the public health crisis we're still in, coming out of, still kind of in. And I personally love daytime parties these days. I'm really happy to go to sleep at night but dance all day. So that's one thing. And yeah, I guess also having lived in Berlin, where there's still a lot of public space in the forms of clubs, like some of the most amazing clubs I've ever experienced, because they feel actually like community hangouts. They feel a little bit like the commons in some way, because you don't have to be productive there. And there can be places to nap or sauna, drink tea, eat, or be on the dance floor, and so they feel very different to anything I'd experienced here. But what living there has made me realize is ideally we need to have community ownership over spaces, because if we don't, then we may not, within kind of city environments or wherever really, we may not have these spaces to commune and gather and practice the cultures that actually give us life. So that's something I hope will happen, is there to be more community land trusts that happen over time, but also community ownership of buildings, so that we can not only teach DJing and play music together, but have more of a kind of set, safe space to grow into and preserve some of these cultures. I really hope to see that in the future years to come.
And it is happening in other places as well. I mean, in I don't know Berlin so well, but in Naples, in Napoli, the social movements are very strong. And when we did our event there, our conference there, we is in partnership with the local, basically, they call them social movements or squats, basically, and they've taken over. Excuse me. Taken over government buildings, and one called Officina 99, and it's been there from 1999, so nearly 24 years. Another one called Skurnitzo, and that which was an old prison actually, and it's been taken over, and there are lots of community groups inside there. That's where the sound systems have their gigs, and it's a whole scene, and it's recognized. And that's why they like the reggae music, because they see it as a protest music. They see themselves in protest against the authorities, or the lack of authority and the lack of provision. And that's what we've got to make ourselves, because as we know with austerity, the provision, there used to be youth clubs, for goodness sakes. Yeah. It's like we haven't got any youths anymore. It's so sad and so destructive. But there are examples of other places where it's happening, and that's really encouraging. And music is always a central part of that, and very often reggae music.
I don't know if it's the same in Berlin, but in Italy, if a building is not used for, I think it's 2 years, the local community's got the right to take it over and provide local services. Normally they end up keeping it for years. So that's something that we can look at over here with your local councillors or whatever.
Yeah,
buildings that are not being used. There's so many of them.
that's true. I wonder what that would look like. I know that
A squat.
like anti-squat companies. Well, yeah, squatting for sure, for sure. But I think the
Trespass.
laws have gotten a lot more severe over here in recent years. But I mean, yeah, that's one area to organize around, definitely. But there are these kind of like anti-squat companies that sometimes get people in to live there, but I don't know about any of them that have kind of allowed venues or things that would play live music. But it's definitely worth looking into. I know we're coming close towards the end. So I've got another question for you all based on something that's come up already a little bit. I'm wondering from your perspectives, what is the most important thing to kind of maintain the essence of sound system culture? And there's a lot of different opinions on this. Do you think it's the use of vinyl? Do you think it's the equipment that's being used? Or is it the kind of conscious container that's created, or something else? I'm just really curious to both of you what it means in terms of the components to really preserve the culture.
I was just going to add another C to that: conscious container, community. I think those three, regarding sound system culture, you keep what you said, culture, containment, and the community intact with whether you're a DJ, whether you're doing sound system. I think those are going to be the three elements to move it forward. Most sound systems have never been able to move forward without their community. So yes, those are the three things I would say. Size of a sound system, quality of a sound system matters, but not paramount.
The other great thing about a sound system is not a one-person show, right? The boxes are heavy, the equipment is getting lighter, but it's still significant effort is required. So that needs a sound system crew, right? And so there you've got a bunch of people who are committed, who are prepared to drive around the country at all hours in a van, very uncomfortably, right? But you've got, but it's not just a crew for getting the job done. It's also basically a whole apprenticeship system. I was saying that Jar Shaka on your dad's sound was what they call a box man, right? Okay, so there's a way of learning about the culture which was set up very, very organically, right? That if you're interested, and that is happening today as well with Channel One, with Mikey. Yeah, he's had several generations of apprenticeships that have gone on to form their own sounds once they've learnt from him. And if you like, for maintaining the culture, that is the best, easiest way, because it happens quite naturally. But in a way that these boxes here, right, are really important, the physical nature of it, not just the experience of the music, but the management of getting those things around the country once you've got a place to play, is, in a way, it ensures its own longevity. It ensures its way of going forward. So I place great store by the technology itself. I prefer the vinyl rather than the digital. The sound is much more pleasant, right? But it's more effort. We've got so much consumerist and ease of convenience and, around us, right? Putting on a vinyl record, even in your own home, if you've got a turntable, is, it's a ritual. It's part of being with technology, often being with other people. And that is, if you like, motivating in itself. And that's, in my mind, one very good way for keeping the culture going.
Thank you. I think we've actually got time for one more, and it kind of feeds into what you were just saying, Julian, and I know what you're thinking about Tiny T as well. So Tiny T, in the documentary that you sent me, Julian, could you remind everyone of the name of it?
Yes, it's called Generation to Generation. We filmed it in Goldsmiths. It's available on the Sonic Street Technologies YouTube channel very easily. And what we did was on the day, and this is basically, it's thanks to that event that I met Tiny here, and it all kind of like came together, is get the youngers in one room and the elders in another room in the morning, right? And then we brought them together to discuss in the afternoon, and a lot of the same issues came up, but this business of the elders wanting the youngers to, if you like, take up the mantle, and the youngers wanting the elders to be more open about their knowledge, and there might be other ways of doing it appropriate to now than what the elders experienced in their lives. And so it's a real discussion that there needs to be a lot more of for the culture to go forward.
I found it super rich, and there's something you said in that Tiny Tea. You said elders have a moral obligation to pass knowledge to the younger generation. So I'm curious, I know you've just referenced the apprenticeship, but could you both speak to, what are some of the mechanisms you envision for elders to do that, to really pass knowledge to youngers who are interested in the culture?
Right, so obviously there has to be more integration between the generations. My situation is this, from my father having the sound system to me continuing it, if I don't pass it on to someone, then it dies there. And all my hard work and my father's hard work diminishes. So it's compulsory that I pass it on to a younger generation that's going to supersede what I've done. But this is becoming quite difficult because I'm having problems finding younger generation that's into my type of music, so to speak. So yeah, it's imperative for your legacies to continue. You have to train up the apprenticeship and have someone continue your legacy. You are no one, it's your legacies that live after you. So I think it's imperative that you have all generations involved when you're not there. And I've always felt that the younger generation needs to be involved. They push you up as an elder, etc. So it needs to be integrated, and that's where we was on with Sonic Street Sounds reasoning, the big gap between the younger and older. And we're closing that gap, but it's still there. And as Julian said previously, it's a worldwide sort of thing, the generation gap. So that's what we can do to make things better.
Okay, so I can add to that as a different kind of answer. I mean, we can all do what we have our power to do. Basically, I'm in an institution, I've got research funding, right? And that can be used, right, positively as we've tried to or continuing to try to do. And what we've found, not just in this country, but in other parts of the world, that when a foreign university goes to Colombia, we've been working in Colombia, that basically just the presence of outside interests makes the local authorities think differently about what they've got, which is sad, right? There was a particular collective in in Urba, in Antioquia, that have been trying for ages, for years, to get a meeting at the university, right? As soon as one of the team arrived in that place, they got the meeting like the next week, right? I mean, which is so sad but okay, we've got the cultural capital to because of our position, we have to use it, right? So that's one way that's going to help. But the other thing that just occurred to me, Cami, when you were saying that, about the lack of transmission, right? On the youngers point, youngers within our community, right? One of the reasons they said they're not interested is because they associate the sound with basically the hardship and sufferation that their parents had. Right, that's really, really interesting, right? That for outsiders, basically the Trustafarians and others, they don't have that association with pain and suffering, right? So they're happy to take the culture forward, right? Which is fine. And the other thing is about the elders and the sharing that just came to me when you asked that question, Cami, that I feel that the more respect that we give to the elders, the more confident they will be in themselves and the happier they'll be to share. Because if you think they've been on this journey, all the hardships, and what happens? Nothing. People forget them, they don't have any profile, they don't have any status. So no wonder perhaps they don't feel inclined to share with others because what they have isn't properly recognized. And so again, that's where the research can come in to recognize, and that's what we're doing on the website. You'll see a lot of elders being interviewed, right? Little clips, it's all sort of tagged and stuff, right? To make it accessible. And to give the status to the elders, and I'm sure that will, well, I hope that will give them more sort of confidence to share. And well, that's one strategy, yeah.
Thank you. I think we've pretty much come to the end of our time, but before we kind of give you a final round of appreciation, could you share with folks how they can maybe get in touch with you or connect more if they want to on these themes?
Well, most of the platforms, I'm on Facebook under Tennyson Goulburn, Instagram Tennyson_Goulburn. I do a show every Monday night called Tiny T's Top 10, where anyone interested in vinyl gets an opportunity to buy vinyl. Yeah, so I've got the vinyl splashdown, which is a bit dormant at the moment, and most of the platforms, Facebook, Instagram, I logged on to TikTok yesterday.
Oh my goodness, I'm not on TikTok.
Yes,
I'm
just
so
yesterday.
impressed.
So a bit of a dinosaur, but yeah. My name is Tennyson Goulburn, and my DJ name is Tiny T, the Mighty Cloudburst. Please look me up. There's a world of heritage behind me, and I've DJed in many countries, seen all the different styles and all the different flavors, and it's really, really nice to see all the other countries endorsing the sound system culture. And I'm just here to sort of put the dots together and link it together. I love that big smile.
And I mean, it's easy, just Sonic Street Technologies on Instagram, on the channels, on the website, the YouTube channel. We'd be happy to hear from anybody. And I'm going to give this to our colleague from Latin America here, so he can put his, what's the name of your sound? Does he have a? Yes. Rulo sound. Okay, Rulo sound. Yeah, right. Okay. And so you can find us quite easy. We're very happy to hear, especially from practitioners. I'm going to link up with this guy and get him on our Sonic map. I'm really glad you came. Thank you. Well, I'm all glad you all came. It's fantastic. I didn't think you'd come back after half time. It's really good.
Yeah, thank you so much. This has been incredibly rich. It's been a real treat to learn and riff with both of you. So if we can give a final round of applause for Tennyson and Juliet.